of me being daddy,
Mysterio!
I became Uncle Eddie.
WWE has a strong presence of Latin American superstars on their roster. Don't believe us? Check out these names. The legendary Rey Mysterio, Damian Priest, Dominik Mysterio, Santos Escobar, Zelina Vega, Bayley, Raquel Rodriguez, Carlito, Dragon Lee, Joaquin Wilde, and Cruz del Toro. That's just the main roster. We're not even mentioning the up-and-comers in the NXT ranks like Roxanne Perez. It's Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin. Tell us your favorite Latin American wrestling superstars in the comments below. Pro wrestling and WWE have pulled many fans and wrestlers from the ranks of Latin America, stretching from South America as well as Central American nations like Mexico, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Puerto Rico. But the label of Latin American superstar expands. Out of all of these countries, Mexico and Puerto Rico stand out as the most important to the larger picture of pro wrestling, with Puerto Rico most famously producing the legendary Carlos Colon, a WWE Hall of Famer, the patriarch of the Colon wrestling family, and one of the most successful promoters of pro wrestling in Puerto Rico. Mexico, on the other hand, has truly weaved pro wrestling, or lucha libre, within their culture, and symbiotically tying it to the history of the country, with the mask being such a colorful expression of the culture. Some of the biggest non-North American promotions in the world exist in Mexico, with CML and AAA. And along with the United States and Japan, Mexico embraced professional wrestling decades before it was in mainstream television. When you think of great wrestling families, you always bring up the names like the Anahuahis, the Harts, the Von Erichs, and of course the McMahons. But Mexico alone has several wrestling dynasties: the Garzas, the Guerreros, the Rodriguez, Diaz, Alvarado, Gonzalez, El Santos Guzman family, and more. Many may not have made it to the global spotlight, but they've helped build up an incredible wrestling culture that still exists and thrives today. As you can see, professional wrestling is enriched within Latino heritage, and with Hispanic Heritage Month having come to an end, it's time to dive into the incredible history of Latino superstars in WWE. Let's keep the focus on WWE and how they've presented Latino superstars. It didn't take long for WWE to understand that Latin American fans wanted to be represented at the top of the card, and when the promotion was following was truly the big draw. But the time had come for something to change. The evil Ivan Koloff shocked fans at MSG, ending Bruno's 2,803-day-long reign as Roman Reigns, and he served as a transitional title holder for Vince McMahon Sr.'s next big star. Just a month after that shocking defeat, the heroic Puerto Rican Pedro Morales became the next big star. Just how San Martino's popularity came as a result of the high population of Italian Americans in the New York City region, Pedro Morales' rise also benefited from the rising Puerto Rican population in the Big Apple. And Morales had a very strong title reign, holding it for 1,000 days, etching his mark in WWE history. While nobody would have thought it would have taken another 3 decades to have another Latino hold the World Championship title, Pedro can be considered the first truly great Latino superstar in the company's history. He even went on to become the first ever Triple Crown champion, having a run with the tag team titles and the Intercontinental title. After Morales' time at the top, things weren't exactly as prominent for Latino superstars in WWE. This was way before there was an emphasis on representation, and even during the boom periods of rock and wrestling in the 80s with Vince McMahon, no Jr., there weren't many Latino superstars who were able to make a name for themselves and have a big splash the same way Morales did. Tito Santana was one major exception. Yes, arriba. We can't go into the nitty-gritty, but if you aren't aware, Tito Santana is arguably one of WWE's best in-ring performers of the 1980s. His 15-year stint with WWE was marred by some stereotypical bullfighter gimmick stuff, yes, Al Matador in the early 90s, but his runs with the IC Championship in the 80s were nothing short of legendary. That's why he's a Hall of Famer. WWE in the 1980s may have been the Hulk Hogan show, but names like Tito Santana made the undercard so strong, colorful, and vibrant with his incredible defenses of the IC title. Santana was one of the names that made the title into what it became, the Working Horse Championship. You knew you were going to get a great match if the IC title was on the line and he was defending it or challenging for it. he still had significant moments and is one of the most remembered names of this time for that reason. Jumping to the 1990s, it was WWE's biggest rival, WCW, led by Eric Bischoff, that gave a bigger spot to Latino superstars. Conan, for example, who was a massive star in Mexico, drawing huge arena crowds across the entire country, never really got that same presentation in WWE, wrestling only just a handful of matches. Well, part of the reason why he was missing out on TV tapings was because, he was competing in Mexico simultaneously and becoming a bigger star there, leading to WWE to just say, we don't have to do this. His big break in the US, though, came with WCW. He even became a member of the NWO. Around the same time, a young Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero also began to get a spotlight in WCW after stints in ECW, along with Chavo Guerrero. Rey Mysterio and Conan deeply connected because his uncle was the man who trained Conan. WCW in the 90s at its peak, it was all about the NWO and Hollywood Hulk Hogan and Sting, those big names, but the mid-card was all about WCW's Cruiserweight division, which was led by a lot of mass luchadors, much like Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero. If you've not seen their Halloween Havoc 97 match, go watch it now. 1998, the superstars of the Cruiserweight division were just not having being overshadowed by the NWO, and Eddie Guerrero formed the first iteration of the Latino World Order, a lineup that included names like Juventud Guerrero, Psicosis, La Parca, El Dandy, Damien, Volano 5, Silver King, and more. Interestingly, Rey Mysterio wasn't a part of the original lineup until he was forced to after losing a match to Eddie Guerrero. When an injury to Eddie forced him to then disband the group, they reunited. Ric Flair's sinful promise of better treatment, better pay, and more women made everybody leave the faction, and it was only Rey Mysterio, the guy who didn't want to join in the first place, who turned out to be the most loyal member of the LWO. It makes it a lot cooler when you consider that he is now the de facto founder and leader of the revived LWO. That is a cool bit of history that plays into today's current WWE. Rey Mysterio's strong WCW run, where he became a worldwide name, was negatively affected by the fact that someone in WCW decided to unmask him, the only time in his career that he had to do that. Yeah, and thankfully WWE wouldn't make the same mistake, and what a difference it made for them financially. Yeah, a lot of people wearing Rey Mysterio masks. We get to the early 2000s when we finally saw Latino superstars becoming bona fide main eventers in WWE for the first time since Morales in the 70s. It was the two men who spearheaded this movement in WCW that would do it again in WWE, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. The two former WCW stars at this point were instantly impacting in WWE, although Guerrero had to get fired from the company, clean himself up, and come back better than ever. When that happened, it was good timing because Guerrero's popularity skyrocketed as WWE once again embraced a growing Latin American audience within the United States and internationally, so they needed someone back at the top of the card to represent that. Culminating in the iconic moment at No Way Out 2004, a revived, redeemed Eddie Guerrero hitting a frog splash on Brock Lesnar to become the WWE Champion. Guerrero's title reign may not have worked out the way he wanted to, nor did Rey Mysterio's run as WWE and World Heavyweight Champion, but the differences that both men made were enormous. Chavo Guerrero also deserves his prop. He was a true mechanical wizard for WWE, providing some incredible, undeniably great matches, a part of the SmackDown 6 in the Ruthless Aggression era, along with Mysterio, Edge, Benoit, and Angle, a group that was truly put in a tough position to go up against WWE's franchise brand of Raw, only to prove themselves to be the more superior brand in the eyes of many fans, and Chavo was a huge part of that. Chavo may have never gotten to the world title level, but he still had a fruitful 10-year career in WWE, and is arguably one of the best Latino superstars to ever grace the ring. The oh-so-cool man from the Caribbean, Carlito, also rose to stardom in this period, with reigns as the Intercontinental and United States Champion. Representing the legendary Colon family we mentioned earlier, he found a lot of success, albeit short-lived, when he left the WWE in 2010. For all the highs of Guerrero, Carlito, and Mysterio, there were some lowlights with WWE featuring Latin American superstars like the very questionable Mexicools. WWE featured a trio of incredibly talented luchadors in Juventud Guerrero, Super Crazy, and Psicosis, and decided to give them the gimmick of riding lawnmowers to the ring. Not only that, but they decided they were done being second-class citizens in the United States and wanted people to work for them, declaring themselves the Mexicools. That name, all of it. As you can imagine, it didn't go down very well, and it's something that would be practically unthinkable in today's television era. But it was only 18 years ago when this was overlooked. It's unsurprisingly, it lasted less than a year. While WWE wants you to forget about that, they certainly want you to remember Guerrero and Mysterio. Eddie would tragically pass away in late 2005. Mysterio, though, would continue to represent the culture at the top of the card. His mask became an integral part of his character, obviously, also opening up the idea and concept of lucha libre to an international audience well beyond the bounds of Mexico to everyone. Now, when you ask people about masked wrestlers, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna know who Rey Mysterio is. He made millions upon millions for WWE with that mask, and it was inevitably time for him to take a backseat in favor of younger Mexican stars. WWE would test the waters with 2 options. On the villain side, Alberto Del Rio, who previously had success as Dos Caras under that family mask he had carried on from his uncles. The other option was Mystico, who would perform in WWE as Sin Cara. While Sin Cara wasn't given nearly the same kind of push, probably thanks to his countless issues in and out of the ring, Alberto Del Rio received one of the biggest pushes of a rookie around that time. Within a year, he was already a Royal Rumble winner, faced Edge in his final match at that time at WrestleMania, feuded with the company's top stars in John Cena and CM Punk over the WWE title, and even won the Money in the Bank and the title in the process. Del Rio's run in WWE ended a bit underwhelmingly in 2014 due to a backstage issue over an employee making a questionable racist remark, and Sin Cara's situation was even more confusing. Many don't remember this, but WWE actually held a press conference in 2011 to announce the signing of Sin Cara, who would take on a new name. He previously was Mystico, as we mentioned, in Mexico. They were making a big deal out of this. The expectations for him were pretty high to be the direct successor of Rey Mysterio, but there was often moments where Huncio, another Mexican superstar, replaced Sin Cara, the original Sin Cara, under the mask. In 2014, Rey Mysterio's WWE run was coming to an underwhelming end as his importance on the roster decreased, and while the original Sin Cara was also released. Huncio, now performing as Sin Cara, teamed with Kalisto in NXT to form the Lucha Dragons. They had moderate success, had some incredible matches, but neither of them made it to Rey Mysterio levels. The first half of the 2010s was admittedly a bit bleak for Latino superstars in WWE, albeit a few exceptions. One of them was on the women's side. AJ Lee rose to prominence for a while as a standout in the not-so-stacked Divas roster at that time. There is a series of Latina stars that made their name during the Divas era. Melina and Candice Michelle were part of the Lita and Trish days in the 2000s, but the Bella Twins, Caitlyn, Eve Torres, and AJ Lee did have different levels of success in WWE. It was a bit unfortunate, particularly for AJ Lee, that she left wrestling when she did, because it was right as the women's revolution began to take shape in WWE. It was already booming in NXT, and one of the big names responsible for that was a woman with Latino heritage, Bayley. She would go on to become the most successful woman in WWE history, being the first woman to be a Triple Crown champion and a Grand Slam champion. Her impressive resume includes Money in the Bank victories. She became the flag bearer of an increasingly popular women's division that was featured in a completely different way. The same division now boasts the stars like Zelina Vega, Raquel Rodriguez. Some even categorize Ronda Rousey on this list because she's Venezuelan. WWE has always been looking for their next big Latino superstar and found limited success with men around this period. But with the current generation of wrestlers on the roster, it is certainly turning in the different direction. The 2 biggest names that come to mind are Santos Escobar, who had some real success for WWE NXT when they were going head-to-head with AEW, and Dominik Mysterio, the son of Rey Mysterio, both seemingly being groomed for bigger roles in the future. What's also a bit ironic is the fact that WWE spent so many years looking for that next Rey Mysterio, only to re-sign him and remind fans that there's really only one Rey Mysterio. Nobody does it like him. As he's approaching his 50s, he moves better than ever before, has endured countless surgeries and injuries on his body. The last few years have seen him do a lot of justice for his legacy, get inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame, but the most important part of his run since 2018 is undoubtedly his introduction of his son, Dominik, to the WWE ranks. When I interviewed him in 2018, that's something he said was his mission, to have a WrestleMania moment with his son, and he was able to do that at WrestleMania 39. But it isn't just Dominik that he's elevated. As the main figure of the LWO, he's hoping to create a wave of new, young Latin American superstars: Escobar, Vega, Cruz del Toro, Joaquin Wilde, and maybe any other Latino superstars that could join the ranks. Mysterio recently revealed that he plans to retire before he turns 50, which seems completely fair considering how much of a truly iconic career he has had and how long he's been at this level of the business. Still, both he and Eddie Guerrero are considered the gold standard of Latino superstars in WWE, and for a good reason. But that isn't to discredit anyone else that we're mentioning here, before, during, or after their time, especially because we now have a roster of future main eventers, and likely many more to come, further enriching WWE's wild and lovely history of Latino superstars.